Hey, welcome back to Metropole Grid. My name is Andre.
I'm Eric Heiden.
And thanks so much for tuning in. We're back with some in-person play. This is Canadian Nationals 2024 East Coast Edition.
This was held in Toronto a couple weeks ago. Is that right?
Yeah. So myself, Patrick, and a bunch of people from Montreal, we came down. We're hosted in Toronto. This is the East Coast Canadian Nationals. It was just a couple weekends ago in the basement of St. Mary Magdalene Church. It was an incredible weekend. Now, the footage we have today, firstly, shout out to Terrence who filmed all this stuff and gave us the footage to work with. This is day 2. And there was a lot of Netrunner. Obviously, it covered the whole weekend. We had about, I think, 40 players show up, if I'm not mistaken, on day 1 in Swiss. And day 2 is just the top 8 cut. We're looking here. We're jumping actually pretty far into the top cut because not everything is filmed. This is, if I'm not mistaken, is the lower quarterfinals. So both of these players have played phenomenal Netrunner for a whole day on day 1. And day 2, they're already a couple games in. Whoever loses this game is going to be out of the bracket.
Who's playing today?
So on the left, this is Mikhail. Mikhail is an old school Toronto Netrunner player. He actually hasn't played a lot of Netrunner recently. He just kind of asks for some decks. Anytime there's a big event, somebody will provide him with some decks and he'll go and he'll play. And obviously he's doing killer. If you're not familiar with the identity, that's an old personal evolution FFG altart back from the day. This thing is absolutely gorgeous. So he's out there trying to do some net damage. And on the right, that's chouxflower. That's Erin. You might know her. She writes great stories, part of the Null Single Games narrative team. And she is also playing, this is a bit of an old school matchup, circa, I want to say 2015 and 2016 in some ways. This is the sort of Aesop's Pawnshop, but it's a lat deck. Back in the day, like PE versus Haley was something that probably exists on this channel for in-person play. We're going to get some lat, going to get some free card draw by matching hand sizes, install some stuff, and start trashing it for 3 credits.
I think I'm peeping some Tattoo ink on Mikhail's side, which is pretty cool on his left arm. And I also think I saw during what we skipped kind of past the mulligans, Mikhail had, I'm pretty sure, a copy of Cerebral Overrider in the opening hand that he mulliganed.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a spicy match.
If I'm not mistaken, this list is the sort of like mitosis classic shell game Cambridge Jinteki, as people call it. This list is, I believe, Bridgman's list, who posted this as one of the options he was considering taking to EMEA Continentals, but he ended up taking the sort of RH punitive 5-3 list he'd been playing since Worlds last year. But this list has just kind of been out there, and it's a really interesting, really dangerous list with a lot of advanceable traps, let alone it also has some tag spice because there's one copy of Check a Scion and has End of the Line and Mindscaping. So if you end up floating a tag, it's going to be lethal really quick. I don't know how much experience you have playing against traps PE. It's not very popular, but are you the sort of player who runs the stuff on the table?
Almost never, no. And actually, most of the people down here in my neck of the woods in New Hampshire, like really, like there's very little PE out here. There was. I think Holly was like a huge PE player, and then once News Team rotated, it was things kind of went away. News Team and the that card that loves lots of little agendas. Stock buyback, that's right. That was the once that rotated, we haven't seen much PE. So
we're gonna see some here again. This is like really old school for me. Both players took the mulligans. They did show their hands to each other. Mind you, in the top 8 cut, this is open deck lists, which means both players know every single card in each player's deck list. And that obviously matters for a Jinteki deck that wants to put traps on the table. But sometimes knowing what the traps are actually makes them even more deadly. When you know there's the 3 copies of Cerebral Overrider, the Check a Scion, the Urtica Ciphers, that sort of puts something on the table, double advance it. Are you going to run or are you going to not? Now, Spin Doctor for the start. We're going to just reposition the camera there. And we iced up something. Diesel. On the runner side, I think our camera's happy where it is now. Apologies, this is on a phone. I think we're locked in here. What's behind the ice?
I have, what is the ice is my question. I was expecting install, but install Reza Spin Doctor, find something. I imagine that there's some kind of an economy piece there. Maybe a bull, what is it, bullwort?
Bladderwort?
Yeah. Plant. Bladderwort. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Bullwort is the big scary bad pub ice.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this list is on Bladderworts, but I think you're right for the economy play. We're looking at oftentimes Rashida Yahim would be the great start. Now, Erin, she gets down the coalescence, mind you. This is the sort of engine. These are the pieces you want to sell. And early DJ Fenris is going to be for Steve Cambridge, which this early, it's not something that's going to fire running HQ. But with this card not being trashed to random net damage, it means you can run HQ and get so many of your cards back in this sort of matchup that wants to, you know, take those cards out of your hand, out of your deck, out of the game.
That's really good armor early on. I have, oh, it looks like we had a credit malfunction there.
Yeah, I think she ends up taking maybe 5 clicks that turn, but Rashida behind that ice, and I'm not sure what's going to take the face check at the Jinteki Ice when the corporation's on 5 credits. I have that Saisentan fear in me that can just end the game on the spot.
Yeah, I very much would love a killer installed before I start face checking against PE, because especially if you're running it like that, some critical piece in your hand, and you don't just want to lose it to random net damage early on.
Yeah, this PE deck actually has a fair bit of ice. A lot of it's really small. I'm not sure if there's any big stuff like Anansi's. We're going to see things like Tithe, I believe Anemone.
Anemone, right.
Yeah, Anemone is a really scary one. That's just 3 damage, and that's kind of what you're expecting whenever you're accessing. You want to have at least 3 cards for that, that snare that exists everywhere. Looks like we're going to install behind a piece of ice. Rashida fired. I'm not sure if Mikhail has more of a turn here, but Erin's side of the board, she's trying to get the lat draw, and mind you, it's really interesting playing P into lat because you kind of want to empty your hand as a corporation. Because if you ever end your turn on 5 cards in hand, that means functionally lat's going to end their turn on 6 cards in hand. And that's often not where you want the runner to be.
There was a mess of cards there in the Mikhail's hand when he put it down, so seems like it is probably 5.
Yeah, I think he's considering here. This might be a mitosis play. I think Rashida was just the start of turn, and now he has a whole mid of cards. It looks like it is mitosis, and mind you, not only a mitosis, that is the Canadian Nationals Commission. That's another Scott Uminga mitosis. So there's going to put 2 cards on the table and 2 advancements on each of them. Notably, these cards don't have to be advanceable cards, as much as they often will be, but the game is afoot. Turn 2, 4 advancements on the table on 2 traps. What's the worst case scenario here?
I think the worst case scenario is probably like a double sting or something like that.
Yeah.
Like just if you don't touch it. I imagine that one of these is a trap and one of these is an agenda probably. Like the 50-50 play is what I would expect out of this. So Cerebral Overrider is quite bad. Urtica Cipher, I expect one is to be, some kind of a net damage, and then the other maybe an advanceable or an agenda.
I think you're right. Like one being a trap, one being a quote unquote good thing for the corp is often what you try and like test the waters with on the early turns. And speaking of Cerebral Overrider, not only is taking 2 core damage really bad because then it's easy to die to other net damage stuff, but Lat will never fire if you can get that early core damage. Now, Erin, she's been really busy getting the Pawnshop down, getting the Simul chip down. Mind you, that Pawnshop, the old FFG variant. And this is the sort of engine that we're going to get cards installed, get the free card draw, sell stuff for 3 credits. And speaking of 3 credits, Rashida, Yahim, turn after turn, 3 more cards for the corp.
Yeah, sorry, totally blanked. Had an idea there, and it's gone.
So nothing on the table so far. Like there's no clearinghouses in this deck. There's no Ronins. So if there's things on the table and you're not running, you're not worried to just die at the start of turn window. I'm pretty sure this deck is also not on things like Reaper function, which is then again an asset that can do damage. But more of the things you're worried about is like scoring a Sting, scoring a Blood in the Water, eventually like getting enough advancements on something like a Fuji asset retrieval, following that up with Neurospike, which that often does lethal 6 damage. As much as we haven't seen a console yet, we'll see if it's an Onacom or a Pantograph. There's a lot of ways that Shaper can dodge damage. But once there's enough stuff on the table that has advancements on it, you kind of are forced to start to reckon and check some of them. Because just enough like stings, enough like little net damage agendas that wears you down to a lethal burst.
I think that the thing I'm always trying to do here is to manage the board and to just be checking things if you can possibly do it. And with enough card draw usually is what is required to keep that going. Do you know if this list is on See How They Run?
I don't think it is. Maybe it's a one of because it does have an end of line, but I don't think it's like a main win condition of the deck. Because the deck is on a singleton end of the line. It has some Mindscapings just naturally as like a soft econ card, but it's trying to give tags mostly through Checklist, I think, and through Snare in general. And notice this, Erin, she's just ignoring the board state. She's just saying like last turn, I didn't die. Nothing really changed on the table. No more cards, no more advancements. So I'm just continue to do my Shaper engine thing. DZ's coming out, Coalescence is now getting installed. That is such a great combo, installing the Coalescence from your heap, because now not only did you get money off that installation, you now have 2 things to sell to the pawn shop. That's a 6 credit play, only on the trash costs of those cards with the pawn shop.
Yeah, I think those 2 cards remaining unadvanced several turns later is kind of a sign, unless this is a real patient slow burn on Mikhail's side.
Now, sometimes you just leave them there. A lot of times, if they're a quote-unquote failed trap, what you want to do is continue advancing them to kind of engender interaction, because people are scared of that sort of Neurospike play. But the single advance behind an ice, I think the list has a single copy of Charlotte Casador, and if there's any Jinteki card you're excited to single advance, I'm assuming that's Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte's or, NGO fronts classically, but I think that the Charlottes have kind of taken that slot.
Pawnshop selling away again. If you played back in the day, the sort of like Haley engine where you just draw, double install. It's kind of what we're doing with Lat here. We're getting that free draw. We're getting that. We have to pay a bit extra for installs, but pawn shopping one thing a turn. Now Buzzsaw comes down, Simulchips comes down, and all these cards here are just cards you don't want to lose to random damage. Simulchips allow you to repair the program situation, but we're a couple turns in here, and third Simulchip, the whole playset, not even ready to run yet, just sitting back and doing, you know, Shaper engine economy.
Okay. So here you have to start dealing with this, Charlotte. Otherwise, things are going to get absolutely out of hand. And this is a lot more setup that I'm used to seeing against a PE deck, where you sort of typically have to treat your cards as HP more than cards that they get to be in the normal state. Also, seeing that early Steve and then not seeing an HQ run is surprising for me.
So early Steve actually didn't have any targets. Like we didn't even have 2 cards. We haven't played a single operation, I think, besides Diesel. So it's more so just that it's a card that Aaron doesn't want to, I imagine, lose to, you know, when the corporation scores an agenda and you take 1 net damage, because that card is impossible to recur in most lists. It's just like for the future, that's a little security piece. Now, advancing Charlotte, we have another card installed advanced slightly off the playmat here. And the more cards on the table, the more likely Aaron's going to have to feel that she has to interact with this board state. I think the Buzzsaw's going to break all the code gates in the list. I think they're just diviners for 1 credit, but it's definitely something you want on the table before you lose it. And we'll see if we can use the Simulchips for recursion for programs, or we're going to use them just to, again, every time you Simulchip back a Muse into a Coalescence, that is so much money on the pawn shop.
Right, I was kind of wondering if we'd see it at the end of the previous turn where it got trashed.
Dr. Nuka, good card draw, mind you, 2 Diesels on tap. The classic play pattern a lot of times against these sort of PE decks, if you're not diffusing the board, you want to run R&D and HQ to get those traps that don't do anything from central servers like the Urdicas and Cerebrals that need advancements. You want to run early and then draw second or third. First run of the game, we're checking this empty remote server. Sorry, this extra remote server. 1 advancement means, looks like it's just a sting.
Yep.
The math on here always gets me. This should be 2 damage, and you generally want to feed the runner the first sting as the corporation, because now your stings do even more damage. We're hitting a Parisha and an Aesop's Pawnshop. There's going to be set a light, and now that means the cards on the table, if those are both Sting 2 and Sting 3, if you score them out, that does 6 damage, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that wild?
Because it'll be plus
2 + 1.
Yeah. Well, the PE damage, the +1, is it 3 and then 4?
I think it'll be 3 and then 3, right? Because it only counts their square area, not yours.
That's right. Yes, that's what they've scored. Yeah.
But that's like exactly what's happening on this board state. Like technically, and it's very unlikely, this board state could be as lethal as soon as now, which is now like feeding the sting over changes the math pretty consistently. I think we make a mistake here. I think the change was incorrect. I'm pretty sure Terrence tried to cut in there. So both players are technically up 1 credit. So we're playing an even game.
Yeah, these kinds of things happen in in-person Netrunner, and you know, having a camera record all your mistakes is it's something that I'm glad that people are willing to allow to happen. You know, like it happens.
Oh, totally.
Even at really high level play.
Oh yeah, it does happen. As much as we would not like it to happen. Mind you, 21 credits for this trap PE deck, and some of it's been hedge funds to Rashida's. Charlotte's just getting worked turn after turn, getting advancement. That's a lot of money.
You cannot let the Charlotte just tick like that. I think it is, for me, it's just like a must trash card.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this list has pinhole threadings. We haven't seen, again, we're expecting to have to get our killer before we want to make a rough face check. Also, mind you, Tattoo Bola, such a strong barrier you'll see in almost every Jinteki list, no matter what archetype you're playing. So that Charlotte seems relatively safe, but not only the extra credits, the extra card draw is the fuel that PE needs to put more stuff on the table and make this this problem board state.
Yeah, the cards now with this many credits that start floating in your mind are things like an Anansi or a Vampiranasa or one of these big cards, but I sort of get the feeling that this list isn't intending to be super rich.
Yeah.
And while it is a threat, I don't know if I would be necessarily worried about face checking an Anansi up front.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure if this deck has any big ice like Anansi, but speaking of money, this is a very important card. No One Home. A 1 influence tech card. This is an old FFG card y'all might not be too familiar with if you're playing more in the NSG world. And this card says that the first time a turn there's tags or net damage, you can cause a trace. And it's a trace 0, but basically it's a credit check. And if the runner wins that trace, the damage is negated. Now, this is a bit tricky because it's the first instance of damage on a turn, which means if you score out a sting, you can block or you can cause, as the corporation, the Shinteki agenda damage to happen before the sting burst damage. But now actually there's an incentive that if you want some sort of lethal flatlines, the corp needs more money than the runner to beat that no one home trace.
Right. And it's interesting. I'm assuming that that card is intended to block some big burst of PE damage.
Yeah.
But since it's open deckless, you know, chouxflower knows that there's also a tag threat.
Yep.
And so that's a really good tech card to happen to have in the deck for this.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's kind of the kind of card where you're like, wait a second, when did they add a sideboard to Netrunner?
Yeah, I'm not a huge sideboard fan, but it is like exactly the sort of tech card you want for both angles of this matchup. But very importantly, money matters. And right now that you're getting Charlotte turn after turn, not that Erin's economy engine is not spinning up, mind you. She's getting clicklessly, near clicklessly, 3 credits a turn every turn with Aesop's Pawnshop. We haven't seen any of the daily casts, which are functionally 6 credit econ cards for this deck, and then all the recursion that come in from Steve. Now we've built out that board state, we've zoomed out the camera. There's an unadvanced card, a card with, again, 2 advancements on it. There's a couple board states here where like sting, blood in the water, like you're actually looking at lethal possibilities, and we'll see if that's going to like force us some interaction, especially with that SMC if we want to deal with some ice.
The thing that I would assume that you have to start doing here is just to start taking down one of these threats, probably starting with the newest threats a turn, and then just like backing off. Like tap that Nuka, draw up, run, disarm something, and then come back from it.
And we're going centrals here. Trickshot R&D is often where these decks are weak, barring the agendas and the snares. Now, Tattoo Bull being res for 2. This is Trickshot, so we have 4 extra credits to work with. SMC is going to start using the first 2, and we're going to see what Fractor comes out this list. I think Shaper decks has some interesting Fractor options. Cleaver, kind of exactly what you want against Tattoo Bull. So we're going to go through. We'll see if Mikhail here has the ice to swap, whether he wants to or wants to keep his money up, get that 4 credit flip.
Hey, can I just say, pretty sweet transition there for SMC. Nice work.
Thank you. It took a bit of time. Oh, we're gonna swap here.
The new alt art from Trickshot from the Scott-Aminga.
Yes,
pretty
there's
awesome.
2 Scott-Amingas, mind you. The Trickshot and the Mitosis. It's great to see both of them on the table. Tithe is the top deck, mind you. Just annoying enough for a sentry there. Second card is just a hedge fund, so 2 neutrals in a row, but unfortunately no steals, no trashes. We have 2 credits to burn. We have access to Simulchip too, so if we need to pull out our killer on the remote server charge or any remote server we're charging here, we can always bring it in with Simulchip into SMC. I think we have the MU for it, especially with the DZ.
So I don't know if the remote run has been announced, but
I think she's considering it.
The Charlotte, right? Go for the Charlotte.
Yeah, especially with the extra credits, like that's either trashing Charlotte. Sometimes in the remote runs, the corporation won't want to res their ice because, you know, you're using house money and you don't want to give that information here, but the Charlotte's already taxing out too.
There we go.
We're charging. Man, Trickshot. I think both these players have foil copies of this. It looks like Erin, she sleeved up the non-foil version. They're very, very, very pretty, both of them. It's a top 8 prize.
Jealous.
Yep.
Nice.
First one, not res, innermost. It's a Tithe. Now you can let that fire. 1 net damage, 1 credit, but we have plans to go get our killer. Can you guess what killer's in this list?
Echelon is sort of the default response.
Think cooler.
Whoa, boi-tata. What?
So I'm not a huge fan of boi-tata, but in this matchup where I think most of the sentries are Tithe, it's actually really good because it breaks 1 for 2 subroutines and you never have to touch the strength. So we break every Tithe in this game for 1 credit instead of what Echelon would be on 2. It's actually like a really good matchup for this exact breaker.
I think that boi-tata represents maybe 1% of the meta. That is a cool choice.
Yeah, really, really neat. Now, it looks like Charlotte was cracked for 3. In theory, it might have been an option to let Erin trash it for 2 credits if you care about that credit differential. 22 credits versus 19 credits for the corporation doesn't matter that much, but 7 versus 5 seems a little bit more poignant possibly. But again, this sort of deck is getting 3 credits at the start of every turn, so I would not count it out. It can't recover. I
see the boi-tata inspiration for a Pawnshop list where it's trashing cards. That's very clever. I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, every turn is something going to be pawn-shopped, almost guaranteed. So why not just have that, you know, value breaker? Rigging up, mind you, with Coalescence, really cool synergy. It actually becomes a 6 credit play because you get that extra charge counter and you don't pay for the Coalescence, which that means it's a 9 credit econ card on top of Pawnshop, which is kind of sick.
Are the only targets for rigging up in this deck the Coalescence?
Oh, you can rig up anything, but Coalescence is probably the only thing with power counters. Yeah, I think you're right.
Right.
Maybe we see a cataloger. Actually, that might be reasonable.
Oh, fair. Good. Still, I mean, you know, a career fair for whatever is pretty nice.
It's neat. No, nothing res yet. There's a lot of options on the table. Again, Erin, she's not checking the table. She's doing the sort of thing where like, we're going to lock top of R&D. I'm going to trash all your assets. I'm going to know what you're drawing into. We haven't seen any snares yet. Just playing the hedge fund. So again, we did break that lock. I believe we drew up there. So tithe should be known in hand. At some point, also pressure on HQ. And the second ice there, we're assuming that to either be the Tattoo Bola from hand or the tithe that we just drew off the mandatory.
Do we know how many copies of Cerebral Overrider are in this
all
list?
of them. Every single one.
All 3?
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
And Lad is so terrified of core damage for like not only game losing situations,
but just off the ability.
Yeah. The ability's turned off. You lose so much card draw. And I think Lad has fired every single turn this game, if I'm not mistaken.
Cerebral's only 2 influence, huh? That's wild. I thought it was 3 or 4.
I thought it was 3. Maybe it is only 2. Yeah.
No, it's just 2.
Wow. And we have that Breaker Suite again. I'm not sure if we're going to need a Turbine in this matchup. It's definitely in this list. We saw it in the mulligan, but it is just not a break you're going to need. I don't think there's any big programs here. Now, Daily Cast came in. Nuka coming in, just keeping the healthy card draw. And there's a chance we won't use the Nuka this turn, but it's just the sort of panic button where like click 1, run R&D, click 2, Nuka if you hit a snare, click 3, clear a tag, and that's how you keep the pressure up.
Yeah, I like having the Nuka on hand against PE. So like click 1, you draw, and then you run.
Yeah, or the other way too, whichever you feel better about the cards in your hand.
Right.
Hey, so you haven't been playing for as long. Have you played Pawnshop decks? Because these used to be like the shaper thing like many, many years ago.
I have played Pawnshop, but only in the recent times.
Cool.
I missed the Haley Pawnshop era. I've heard about it spoken very fondly. People love that archetype.
Because Erin, she was definitely one of those players grinding these sort of value engines. And I know she's been like repping this on like JNet for a while. So it's really cool to see this. But if you want to build a board state, sell things and have all these like start of turn triggers and like flexible board states, I cannot recommend this enough, as much as you don't often see it at top tables. I think a lot of players more want that sort of spec work sort of like burst as opposed to the Pawnshop slow kind of siege engine. Now, Mikhail.
This has been...
Yeah?
I was just gonna say this has been a long buildup on both sides, but especially for Erin's board state to get to this point. The fact that the corp is like it's putting threats out, I guess, but then they're not being turned into downsides fast enough for the lat deck to not be able to set up. So it's interesting.
That's the thing, is like if you don't get the exact right cards on the table, this is not a clearinghouse deck, right? It's not a Reaper function deck. So Erin's aware that she can sit back and build her engine because the corp needs so much time to score to 7 when they have so many like small agendas in the deck. Now we are going back in. boi-tata again, tithe for 1 credit because we've already pawn shopped something. Second most, Tattoo Bola. It looks like it was a Bola for Bola swap. Now one thing here that I don't love, you gotta be careful in tournaments that you're doing the Tattoo Bola swap on the table, not in your hand. Just because you can't put the same card back. That's not what's happening, but reviewing this, I'm like, wait, do the rules say how to swap work? You want to keep them on the table if you can. Now, Neurospike off the top.
Neurospike.
That's a very important. We hit our first snare too.
Ooh.
Easily going to pay 4 there. That is 3 net damage and a tag. It's going to knock some cards out here. But Erin, she's definitely running soon in the turn so that she can draw up later. And we are going to trash that for 0 credits. Now, the damage
the tag
here
is the thing that's really heavy hitter on for a snare for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's. I think some players lost matches over the weekend because they forgot about the tag. And some of these P decks are now really caring about the tag. We have a really healthy hand here. So again, this is relatively early on the turn. Maybe click 2, I think. Losing another Pawnshop, a Compilation. That's a good card in this matchup, especially when you see your Neurospike. But with 2 Simulchips and it's DJ Steve, that should definitely be coming back no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the kind of card you wish you had installed.
Yeah.
Can you use a Compilation to pull the
ambushes
snare?
After it fires.
After it fires, yeah.
It doesn't beat on access because it's a card you are accessing and all those say like when access do something bad. It might be a bit more nuanced than that, but it definitely doesn't work. Just like you can't amp the snare.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Now we're swinging the remote server. We have fewer cards in hand on 4. So if this is like a Nemini into Urtica, that's potentially lethal. But once the Nemini gets rezzed, you have some information. We're breaking, we're accessing single advancement. It's an NGO front.
Oh.
They are in the list. I think we have a full play set of them. So there's more options on the table, not just agendas and Urticas. There are some financial options. And we were talking about Erin. She was on 7 credits a couple turns ago. She's now like on 18. And that's kind of just like what Pawnshop does. It's like very, very insidious how it sneaks up on you on credits.
It's really high credit scores on either side. And I come to think of it, the idea that a mitosis deck would cut NGO fronts from the list like makes no sense. The trick shot, I think, is a card that PE players must love because it really incentivizes the runner to keep going and to push their luck to get the value out of those credits. But and like, you know, after you hit the snare, to decide to continue to run is potentially what could get you into really deep water. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, multi-access against PE is something the Corp enjoys. But speaking of multi-access, we've seen a lot of cards from only R&D here. We haven't seen a single agenda, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Sting came from the table. So the question is, where are the agendas?
It seems like they're all just ready to be scored when it's lethal on the board.
Install advance,
or at least one of these cards.
Yeah. And you got to watch out with Neurospike too, right? Like even a Sting, if you score that out, that's 4 damage with the Neurospike. Like you have these weird combinations. So you can do like advanced, score, Neurospike, blood in the water if they go down to 0 cards. But I think Lat's turn. Like Aaron's been ending with 6 cards in hand just about every single turn.
And we still have the no one home. So it seems like checking something on the board is like, it's about overdue. It would be for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's see again. You mentioned this earlier. Like, if you're not dead yet, do you have to start checking now, or do you have to wait for Mikhail to continue to advance these threats until you're really worried? Now, install advanced events and remote servers, taking a lot of pressure here. We're running HQ.
I'm really worried at this point.
I'm glad you're enjoying the tension of this game. There's a lot of stuff on the table, and she's just not checking them.
Aaron, run these cards. Run them, please. I'm scared.
Bullet to cleaver swap again. You just got to keep those cards on the table. There's definitely nothing goofy happening here, but that's just like, I think you need to keep that clean as much as possible. Now, Steve is going to fire. We're not going to give actual options to the corporation. It's just going to be Muse into Muse. We're going to pick a Muse. And that, again, that card alone, when it comes back from Steve, is installed and is functionally with DZ. It's like, what, +7 credits or something? Access. Oh, that's a scary card to see in hand.
Oh, man, that's where that cupulation would have been good at.
Yep.
To pull that card out.
You have 2 simul chips, mind you, not a real cost when you're pawn shopping your programs once a turn. There's the Muse. Now we have the MU here. You can Muse back a Coalescence for the Greedy Econ. You can even Muse back a Cupulation and then just sell it and then like continue that engine. But we're going to go here actually for the Coalescence. So just that Econ play to push forward because, mind you, money does matter. Actually, it looks like Erin's going to reconsider this. I think she wants to reorder this. She might have another DZ. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. I was wondering, what's the console in Aaron's list, or is there one?
I'm not sure. There probably is at least a pantograph, but this list is not event heavy, so it doesn't really want to run Anacam. So I think pantograph might be the option unless we're spending influence on something.
Right, yeah. Or just a whole mess of DZMZs.
Yeah, sometimes DZ is like just good enough. Now double events on the table here. Advance on 3 Strepper cards. Could be 3/3/1s. 2 of them can be stings. This can be massively lethal. 6 cards in hand. No Stone Ship chart room. No Onacom. No damage prevention on instant speed. But nothing is moving. Corporation just drawing more cards. Understanding that HQ is probably just Tattoo Bullets forever. You get in there. You get that Steve every card, every turn. You're drawing back trick shots. You can get that Capulation back. Simul chip. So looks like Mikhail is going to put a second ice up there. As much as most of the ice is going to be broken for 1 to 2 credits. I think everything's actually broken for 1 credit.
The thing about no one home is that it doesn't actually prevent core damage.
It doesn't.
Net damage. Yep. And at this point in the game, one of the 4 double advanced cards on the table is absolutely a cerebral overrider. So
yep.
It does become a very daunting thing to check any of these cards at this point, because once one goes, it might be, the flood might come right after that with a bunch of things being scored in rapid succession, giving you net damage.
Also, like check a Scion could be there, which means you basically have to check on turn 1. You could trace your way through through no one home, I'm pretty sure, but that's 3 tags. So if you're not checking that immediately, like your turn is kind of goofed when you're going to end your turn, get end aligned Mindscape probably. Pawnshop.
Yeah, but finally crossing over the credit differential there, Aaron on 28 versus the 25. So now the no one home is effectively live.
Do you worry there's NGOs on the table?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Any one of those cards is +8 credits. Oh, boy.
It's like such a weird Cold War where it's like all the no one home credits matter. Like it's good the corporation has got this much money because it's actually kind of relevant. And now Aaron needs to stay safe while still putting pressure on and still keeping the credit threshold up, which at least Pawnshop is really good at that. Like single clicks for 7 is wild. There's Tides again, Tattoo Bola, just carving through for 1 credit.
Tunneling R&D and HQ and trying to pull the win out on centrals, I guess.
We'll see if a compilation hits the table. Mind you, hitting either the Neurospike or the End of Line are both kind of pretty big wins for win conditions getting, removed from the corporation's hand. And it looks like that's the case.
Yeah.
Simulship now, also, there should be 2 in the bin. So what a really nice timing here is that Erin, she can pull 2 simulships and just have way more access to more programs coming in. That's Steve Cambridge, mind you, pick 2 cards. They can be the same card. That's good fun, isn't it? And then you get 1 removed from game, 1 returned to hand. He is a Gmod.
Sometimes you don't want to think too hard, Andre. Come on. It is more fun when it's 2 cards, for sure.
It's so much more interesting when they're different cards.
Access. Yeah, I've had some recent games where the best interactions have been 2 separate cards, and my opponent's going, "Oh, good,
good choice."
All right, Neurospike getting pulled onto compilation.
So that's really big. That means the Fuji line, which technically does, I think, 6 damage, 3 for the agenda, 3 for the Neurospike. I think this list also has a singleton Trick of Light. So there's a bit of credit acceleration, or sorry, advancement acceleration. So if a card is on 2 advancements, you can do Trick of Light, Advanced Neurospike on a Fuji and do that 6 damage burst. As much as Lat will have something to say about that, as much as like No One Home will have something to say about it. There's also something really big here the corporation might want to keep in mind. If Erin is counting on ending her turn with 5 cards in hand to match PE, let alone now PE on 4 cards in hand, is you can res a Spin Doctor in the last paid ability window to drop more cards than Lat has in hand to suddenly dodge that sort of Lat trigger. And that actually can be the lethal setup trap.
Right. Got to pop the existing spin first, of course, but that shouldn't be a problem at this point. I think there's probably stuff in the bin. I haven't seen too much stuff trashed, actually. I can't. It'd be interesting to see how many cards are in archives right now.
Yeah, now that spin doesn't seem like it's drawing a lot of heat. We're going to hush that ice. It looks like it's either a Tattoo Bola. We're imagining a Tattoo Bola. Now, I think we might get the card match here, but that's Spin Doctor. Only 2 cards to trash. And it's a card that I actually want to target sooner than later in this sort of matchup. And it's mostly just so the corporation can't shuffle back snares, which like healthy PE gameplay. But the more that you're trashing their traps, the less that you want to give the ability to put those back in the deck. So I want to control that as soon as possible. And we'll see how long this Spin Doctor stays on the table and how much that recursion can actually matter in this matchup. It might not matter at all.
I'd like to know more about this healthy PE gameplay because I don't know that exists exactly.
So back in 2016, there's this thing called click compression. No, this is actually genuinely, I think, a pretty fascinating PE gameplay because it's about the table. It's not grinder, but here we have another mitosis. So we're gonna definitely, I'm assuming, engender some interaction. Now we've seen a lot of cards off the top of the deck, and nothing we've seen is mitosisable. Like we've only seen operations and ice. You can technically mitosis ice for what it's worth, but at this point, it's hard not to imagine that there's not lethal stuff on the table if you don't start touching cards.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any mitosis advancement ice targets in this deck.
No.
I think you'd have to be very specific for that. But when I discovered that rules interaction, it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. Get your Messna Chestos for value or whatever. But 3rd card on the table as well. That being a Spin Doctor is actually really fascinating. But now with like Trick of Light, with advancement, the Neurospike is now held on Erin's side of the table. There's a lot of advanced cards on the table. Like this is a frightening board state. What are you touching?
I just can't. I think it's got to be one of the. For me, it's the middle 2.
Okay.
It's maybe not the newest stuff that went out because there's some master plan at work on Mikhail's side. Just like. Everything's going to come down all at once unless you start poking at those. Or you somehow rip through a lot of cards and centrals. But against PA, again, like you said, it's hard to do that with multi-axis because then your hand empties and you leave yourself weak.
Speaking of hand empties, like a really good thing about this mitosis install play is Mikhail's on 1 card in hand, which means functionally it's going to be nearly impossible, at least safely, to get the lat draw, which is very, very important. So Erin, she's taking a really big think here. She also noticed that like she's been clicking to draw over hitting that using the Dr. Nuka on the basis of like that panic button, that like offshore diesel is so important if you collide with the wrong stuff. Speaking of offshore diesel, that's an actual shored diesel. So we're going to start with a lot of cards in hand. We might be able to click 2 and 3, hit the table, but if you hit a double advanced card, you might have some problems if that card's name is Check a Scion. Oh, we're just going centrals. Or there's enough pressure on the table as a shaper, you just trick shot.
I mean, it's both, right? You're going to see a couple things, and then you can check something if you don't get in trouble.
And no surprises here. Tattoo Bowl has been swapped time and time again. Tithe, we haven't seen anemones, diviners break all that stuff for 1, as much as anemone has access text or on res text. So now we can see 2 here, and if we don't take a lot of damage, you're right, we will swing onto the table as well. First card, Urtica, seeing that in R&D does change your perception of what's on the table. Same with an Overrider.
Oh, that is a good trash.
She's giving that a confident trash. Man,
Too bad the spin is still on the table, right?
Yeah, it couldn't matter. But now seeing those traps in archives makes you think the table could be a bit safer. Blood in the Water, just sneaking that out.
One of the unadvanced cards even.
Yeah, unadvanced. And sometimes that's a good target for the mitosis. But if that's on the table, that's just a sneaky net damage sometimes if you get the runner to low cards in hand, or just lethal if no cards in hand. Now P is going to take a damage. Got a lot of options here. I think Aaron yells, "Oh, come on," losing the Cataloger 1 and 7. It's such a good card in this matchup. Never touch a snare, find the Fujis when it matters, but unfortunately losing that, the net damage. Still healthy on 5 cards in hand. Diffusing actually a really important card on the table for certain kill combinations. 3 to 0, but I still think the Corp is putting a lot of pressure with all these white iron clays on the table.
I think you just got to run that spin.
There you go.
Yeah,
hey.
Yeah.
So we'll see what goes back in. I have no doubt snare goes back in, but that might have been left a bit too long considering these traps can go back in. There's also a lot of face down cards. And seeing how Aaron hasn't been checking the table, whether it gives you the confidence to push agendas or just say, I have a spin, I can discard agendas and just get more traps on the table. It's obviously like seasoned to taste based off of the PE player. I think we see 2 Overriders are out. Oh no, that's a mitosis. I think Mikhail's trying to figure out whether he wants to get the mitosis back in. And unfortunately, I think he thinks that he needs to get the snare and a face down in. So whatever face down it is, that's more important than a mitosis, which means it might just be a big agenda.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the Cerebral is that top card there. That's the old art, right?
Yeah, that's the old NSG art from Creation and Control, like the first deluxe expansion from like 2013. That card's been around forever.
Mm-hmm. I've tried many times to make it work, and I always don't have the money when they find it.
Yeah, 3 credits. It is expensive. Mind you, all the old traps did cost money, unlike Chekist and Urtica. But now, Aaron, a lot of cards in hand. We haven't res anything. Only 2 options for the corporation. We know the 1 card in hand, besides the mandatory draw, is the end of the line. And now Mikhail's giving us a think here. The question is, how much damage can we do? Again, Sting is so important. Each Sting does 3 damage combination. The question is how many cards in hand, and I think it's hard to tell how much Aaron's holding. It looks like at least 4, but if it's only 4, that can be a problem. Think we're making a move?
In my imagination, all of the double advanced cards on the table are just failed traps.
Is it all the Overriders, all the Urticas, all the agendas still in R&D? It's a possibility.
It's just doggedly pursuing the goal of the flatline.
You just start advancing your traps. Like, I love the triple advance, the quad advance. Just more stuff on the table. That was the top decked card.
God.
End of the line is in hand. What's the rest of the turn there? Install?
Is it, have we passed turn already?
I don't know. I don't think he did anything.
No, okay. It's just install. Click for 2 credits.
No, advance? Hold on. We're going for something. It's a Sting.
Okay.
I think we're trying to get for lethal here. So Sting is really important. It's 2 damage and 1 net damage. The problem is, like, no one home would have to fire on the first damage. So if you want to lose the first damage to PE, but I don't think Aaron is firing it here. It's 24 to 27 credits. I think there's a chance that Mikhail has a misunderstanding that's going to come up of how no one home works, but it's only for the first damage. So that means it's not going to go across this turn. PE is going to do its damage. We're going to lose 1 card to Coalescence. We have 5 cards in hand. It's going to take 2 more. There's another Sting on the table. That's lethal.
Yeah, this is a dangerous situation. So it was one of the double advanced cards.
Yeah. It looks like it was Sting, and we have so many other options here. Got to figure out on the table. An NGO front is being cracked here. So now we do have the credit lead.
Did we lump all the net damage all up in one? Sting does
X, it prevents the first. So it would prevent
X plus 1.
Yeah. So yeah, Sting lumps it, but then PE is separate. Second
right, so
NGO
Sting
front.
Was 2 and PE was 1.
Yeah. So we're up here on 40 credits. I think here Mikhail understands, like, oh, now I have more money than you, but Aaron reminds that, like, this is only the first instance of damage. So with 2 NGOs on the table, 3rd Sting was there. That is a flat line. So unfortunately, it was all there. 2 Stings were on the table. I think Aaron had a chance to fire the no one home on the first instance of damage because Mikhail didn't understand how the interaction worked. That was first instance, but he had the 2 NGO fronts on the table. So if he just cracked the NGO fronts, started scoring out the Stings, he can blast through that trace no matter what. So the worst case scenario was on the table. It was sting into sting. That's 6 lethal. That's really hard to beat. And all that is dodging lat by going down to that 1 card in hand. Great turn.
I think knowing that the cerebrals in the deck, it makes it a lot harder to check those cards and allow that kind of board state to build up. It's a very real threat.
Yeah.
And you know, once that kind of board state gets established, it's really hard to dismantle it.
It's hard, yeah. It definitely is very hard. Core damage is just really hard for lat in general, that's for sure. And once you hit 1 cerebral overrider, the game is so much easier for the corporation, who just has to now figure out how to do 4 net damage in a single turn as opposed to 5, let alone 6, even sometimes 7 when lat gets a free card draw. But that was a 6 net damage turn, so like you're not dealing with the table that can sneak up on you. Well played to both players. Unfortunately, Erin, she also played P, mind you, at this event. She played a slightly different variant, more acid-based, so she's very familiar to the flatline. But well played, Mikhail is going to move on to the lower finals to play against, I believe, John, which we'll be seeing in the next video. Fantastic. Yo, Eric, thanks so much for joining me. Can you shout out your channel? You do some great stuff, especially the in-person play. Like, I know you were just at East Coast Nationals, and that stuff is coming up on your channel, and also QTM. What's going on?
Yeah. So my channel is Neon Static. If you aren't familiar, go check that out. I assume that Andre is very good with links, so might have a.
It'll be down there. Yeah.
As Andre said, we just got footage from East Coast Nationals, which was happening, I think, just shortly after this tournament, and we are doing joint coverage with the tournament in a similar fashion to what Andre does here. We're splitting the coverage with QTM. So we did the round 1, which was Saga versus Analyze Chris. That game is up on our channel right now. You can go check it out. It's, I think, a very good game. 2 very good players. And then rounds 2 and 3, QTM is going to cover. And then after that, we're going to go back for round 4. So if you go check out QTM and our channel, subscribe to those if you are interested in more games like this.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I'll link to all that stuff is in the description. Again, I'm a huge proponent, as much as it doesn't exist that much on this channel, of in-table play. It's great to see that back on not only a Metropole Grid, but other fantastic YouTube channels as well. On that note, real quick, before you sign off, I am a person who, because of doing that kind of work, know how much work goes into videos like this. So if you at least are not subscribed or like this video, do that for Andre, please. And remember, he's got a Patreon. Thanks so much, Eric. On that note, we'll be back in just a couple days with more stuff. We'll be to the lower finals here at Canadian National 2024. Such a fantastic event. Shout out to everyone there in Toronto giving us a great time. And thanks so much for watching. Eric, once again, thanks for joining, eh?
Thanks.
Cheers. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Huge shout out to Eric for joining us. Again, he's editing through some of East Coast US Nationals. That should be up on his channel and then half up on QTM. You probably already know that, but the links to all that stuff should be in the description. Again, also thank you to Terrence who filmed all this stuff, set up a phone on a tripod to film a bunch of the Canadian Nationals, and it turned out really good. It's generally kind of astounding. We did gameplay on this channel when we started about 7 years ago, and the camera I used for that is honestly not as good as modern cell phones. So if you're looking to get any sort of like gameplay filmed up, whether it's a GNK or a Nationals, and you want to put your own YouTube channel up and you got a cell phone, you're like 90% there. So give it a shot, honestly. It's like the easiest it's ever been, which is pretty cool. Huge thank you to all these names here and more. Again, these are folks that support the Metropole Grid on Patreon. There's also a whole bunch of daily cast supporters, incredibly appreciated. Videos like this take a lot of time. Getting all these rigs and engines up, all the motion graphics, the commentary, it's a lot of work, and I'm super excited to do it and to be able to do it, and that's largely in thanks to all these people here and more. So if you're looking to support the Metropole Grid, you can find a link to the Patreon down below. Otherwise, just liking the video, sharing it, subscribing, all that stuff helps too. And we'll be back. Again, this is already the lower finals, so there's not that much more road to go here in Canadian Nationals, but we have a couple more games coming up, that's for sure. The finals is pretty sick. And of course, NAMPC Montreal is just around the corner. We're gonna be filming that as well with a cell phone. So that should be up on the channel probably in a couple weeks. It takes a while to edit through that, but excited to have more in-person gameplay as well. Thanks so much for watching. Ciao.